They moved to a city they've never been to, opened a restaurant with just 12 grand, and had a line wrapped around the building on day one. He was a carpenter, and she was sleeping in the back of a cafe.
Really sucked. I mean, it was a bad industry to be in. I couldn't buy a job if I wanted one. I kind of knew that the current job that I was working on in downtown St. Louis, after that was over, I was going to be laid off for a while. I knew that and was very honest and open about it. And we started having these really long conversations at night. She was actually living in the back of the cafe she opened.
They built a 116 location franchise brand, completely bootstrapped, no outside money, no safety net. This is Don Varady on the exit plan. Today, I am joined by Don Varady, who is another, I don't know if you're North Carolina native or not, but another North Carolinian such as myself. Don is over out on the coast, and I'm here in Charlotte. But we're going to get into a really cool concept that Don's been putting a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into, and has taken the nation by storm. Don is here with Clean Eatz, which I'll let him share more about, what exactly it is. But I want to start, kind of from the beginning, Don. You started Clean Eatz after you had your own personal health and fitness journey, and then you turned it into a national franchise brand. At what point did you go, hey, I want to eat better to, I want to build a business around this whole thing?
So when I met my wife in 2010, she had started a little cafe in Bethalto, Illinois. I grew up in Edwardsville, Illinois, which is right outside of St. Louis, kind of metro area there. And we were introduced by a mutual friend, personal trainer at the gym. And I was already kind of competing. I had already competed once in a bodybuilding show and was just fully engulfed in that sport, that world. And I was a carpenter at the time, I was a carpenter right out of high school. And when I met her, she had just started this little cafe. And for clarity, Bethalto is kind of out in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of like a really, really small kind of country town. And so she was kind of the first one to bring like a healthy eating concept to that area. No one had ever kind of experienced it before. And I think she was open, I think maybe a week. She was so new that she had zero equipment. When I went in there to eat lunch with the mutual friend of ours, I got a water and she handed me a bottle of water like this out of an igloo cooler under the counter. I'm like, what the heck kind of contraption is this? But anyway, we hit it off immediately and started dating a few weeks later. And then I think about 4 or 5 months into that relationship is when we were having serious conversations. This was coming out of the recession where that hit the housing market really, really bad. So construction in, call it 2008 to almost 2011 really sucked. I mean, it was a bad industry to be in. I couldn't buy a job if I wanted one. And I kind of knew that the current job that I was working on in downtown St. Louis, after that was over, I was going to be laid off for a while. I knew that and was very honest and open about it. And we started having these really long conversations at night. She was actually living in the back of the cafe she opened because where her parents lived was like an hour away. And so on the weekends where she didn't have her 2 little girls, she would just stay there at the restaurant. She would go to the gym and train, shower at the gym. She had a restaurant, so she was eating. And I had a 2-bedroom house of my own that I had gotten after I'd gotten divorced. And so eventually she would come and stay with me at my house. And, but then we got serious about, okay, where is this relationship going? Are we going to do this thing? Is this just, casual or, and she had always been very upfront and kind of persistent, I guess, with me that she didn't want to stay in that area too long. She had had a few melanoma scares. And she said, look, I don't plan on being here long term. I want to move this business to somewhere I enjoy being. I want to be on the beach. I love the water, which we always laughed about was kind of ironic. She had melanoma skin cancer. And I'm like, you want to move to the beach and be in the sun and on the beach all the time. But anyway, I had been in a place in my life where I needed to get out of that city. I had gone through a divorce, a couple bad breakups, was drinking a lot, doing the whole partying thing that people in their late 20s do. And I said, I'm all in. I will go wherever you want to go. I have nothing tying me here. And so over that short period of time, I think it was about 4 to 5 months in, we made the decision to be business partners. And we always laugh about that. And people still to this day, our family specifically, still think that we're crazy, even though we've been together 15 years now and we've built an empire with this brand. But, going into it, my parents were flipping out. They're like, you're going to give up your pension. You're going to walk away from everything. And so one of the conversations, that we had one night, I said, look, if we're going to do this and do it right, the only way that I can do it with kind of good intentions and not and feel good about doing it, I got to liquidate everything and just start my entire life over from scratch. The bank owned me. I was paying a mortgage on a house that I was barely able to afford the amount that I was working. A year prior, I had just financed one of the new Dodge Hemis that came out at that time. So, I mean, I was buried in debt. And so I just said, look, I'll liquidate everything to do this. I don't have much cash, but whatever I do have, I'll put in the business and we can make a run at it. What else do I have to lose?
Yeah.
And so that was the decision that we made to do. She followed me to the bank in a little beat up minivan she was driving at the time. And I walked in and I dropped my key fob on the desk and turned around and walked out. They knew I was coming. I let them take my truck, and then we drove from the dealership to my house. I packed up about 6 to 8 boxes of the belongings that I wanted to keep and loaded them up. And we drove them to our parents' farm, threw them in a barn and storage unit, and I let them foreclose on my house. And then a few weeks later, I filed a personal bankruptcy and wiped everything clean. And then I had about $5,000 left to my name, and we kind of threw it towards equipment for the restaurant and things like that. And we were living in the wedding salon that was in the space next to the restaurant. We knew the landlord really well. He loved us. And he was like, look, if you guys need the room, I'm not renting the space out right now. There's an efficiency room in the back that had like a bathroom, a little mini kitchen. And he was like, feel free to throw a bed in there if you guys want to sleep in there. So we did that, man, for almost a year. When she didn't have her girls, her and I, we just stayed there at the restaurant. We worked 7 days a week. We would go to the gym and train, get our workouts in. We were both prepping for shows, so it was really easy. It was some of the best times we've ever had, to be honest with you. We had zero responsibility, no debt, none whatsoever. Um, and then on the weekends where she would get her girls, she had went through a divorce and had split custody of her little girls, and they were, oh man, I always get this. They were probably 6 and 9, I think, at the time, something like that. And but on the weekends that she had her girls, we would just go back up to her parents' farm and stay there on the weekends and do things with the girls on the weekends, or run them back and forth. We would work the restaurant and then go up there and go to movies and do things like that on the weekends. Take them back to their dads, take them to school, and then off to work. We went the next week. So that's kind of how we started doing what we're doing. And then
And that
shortly,
was still in Illinois, right? That was
yeah,
you
yeah. At
moved.
this point,
Okay.
we're still in Illinois. And then about 8 months later, I would say, not quite a year, we had an opportunity fall in our lap. There was this older lady that owned a cafe in Edwardsville where I grew up. It was on downtown Main Street there, and she sold it to us for literally pennies on the dollar. Like, we didn't have a lot of money then. We were what you would consider now broke. Um, but we had just enough money that we could buy this restaurant, and we were running 2 locations at that point. We just flipped the brand over and, painted everything, and we had 2 cafe locations, one in Bethalto, one in Edwardsville. And the
Was it
one in
called Clean
Edwardsville,
Eats then?
no, 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 it was called Local Cafe at the time.
Okay.
And very feminine branding, like very, it was kind of ugly. And she'll admit it to this day. I don't know what I was thinking. The colors were horrendous. Um, but we ran the Edwardsville location for a little over a year. And at that point, we were getting serious about moving. We were starting to look on Craigslist for, we had our heart set on Florida. That's where we were going, and no one was convincing us otherwise. And then we wound up going to the Arnold Classic one year. That's a big bodybuilding show in Columbus, Ohio. And we ran into a lady that Yvonne followed for a long time. Her name was Jen Hendershot, and she won Miss Olympia in the fitness division. So we walked by her booth, and she got to meet her and talk to her. And we had our like locale cafe T-shirts on it. So she was curious about what it was, and we told her, and we said we're looking at moving it to Florida and this, that, and the other thing. And she said, don't go to Florida. Florida's, you don't want to be there. Go to North Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina. We kind of looked at each other and we're like, where in the hell is Wilmington, North Carolina? We didn't listen. We did not listen. That Labor Day, we wound up taking the girls on a vacation to Fort Myers, and we set up a real estate tour and made them miserable for a week. We were on a vacation, but her and I's, ulterior motive was to find a piece of real estate to move the restaurant to. We wound up never finding anything that, just kind of felt right. And so went back home. The following year comes back up. We go back to the Arnold Classic, run into Jen again. And she said, asked us how things were going and we told her about our trip to Florida. And she said, go look at Wilmington, North Carolina. So then I was like, okay, there might be something to this. So at that point, internet wasn't what it is now, but I'm still on Craigslist, right, looking for restaurants that are being sold in Wilmington. We came across this little deli, and I said, Yvonne, look at this. This is exactly what we're looking for. We need to figure out how we can go look at this. And so it was coming up on Labor Day. The girls were going to be with their dad. We had a long 3-day weekend plan of not working. The cafes were closed. So we made the split decision to jump in the minivan that barely should have made it to Missouri, much less North Carolina, driving it across the country. But we made a straight shot. It was 17 hours to Wilmington. We put the little deli's address into the GPS, a little TomTom at the time. That was before the phones were what they are now. We pull up to this little cafe and fell in love with it instantly. The whole drive there, we were like, we want to be next to a gym. We want to be kind of surrounded by where we think our customers are and the people we want to be surrounded with. There was a Gold's Gym across the street. There was a supplement store in the same plaza. I mean, you couldn't have made it any more perfect. And then when we walked into the deli, we kind of looked at each other and we're like, this is it. Like, this is exactly what we wanted. And we didn't even, this is how dumb and like naive we were. We didn't even negotiate it. We went straight to Dave that owned it and offered it him asking price right there on the spot. And he took it. And we just said, look, can you give us until Thanksgiving to go back, sell our cafe and come back here and we'll take this over. And we made him a small down payment and he said, sure, I'll keep it running until Thanksgiving. And that's exactly what we did. We went home and we were able to kind of piecemeal, I guess. At that point, we had already shut the original location down because it had cannibalized, Edwardsville had cannibalized it. And so we negotiated a sale on the equipment for the restaurant. There was these Indian guys that wanted to do an Indian restaurant there. So we sold them our equipment and we sold the locale, like, I guess, book of business, our client list, basically, to a friend of ours in town that was a personal trainer that wanted to take the brand over and move it. And so that's how we came up with the money to buy the cafe. We sold it for the exact amount of money. So we moved to Wilmington with about 12 grand in our pocket and started a restaurant. We used her brother-in-law's dually with a 16-foot car trailer with all of our personal belongings and the restaurant equipment we needed to open the cafe in one move. And we unloaded it. This was Thanksgiving, so we got back in the truck that night after we had gotten the keys to our apartment. That's a whole nother funny conversation, but we rented an apartment sight unseen. Long story short, it was a disaster. We got in this thing. It smelled like cats had been in there peeing for a month. It smelled like it was terrible. She cried the whole night. She's like, I can't live here. I'm like, look, we'll get it cleaned. We'll paint. We'll do all kinds of things. And so we unloaded our personal belongings in the apartment. We unloaded the equipment into the restaurant. We got the keys. We got back in the truck the next day, drove all the way back to St. Louis, had Thanksgiving dinner with our families. The next day, we get back in the truck drive all the way back to Wilmington, North Carolina, and started the process of getting the restaurant up and going. And we opened it in January of 2013.
Wow.
That's
That
how we
is
got
insane. That is such
the
a wild story.
the Clean Eatz brand. The way that that kind of came to life was during that time frame where we were kind of in limbo. We had this. She had a timeshare that she had had with her ex-husband that she had some time that she didn't use, and so we booked a little stay up in Atlantic City, which is about an hour north of here, in this resort. Now, mind you, at this time it's dead of winter, colder than you know what. And we were both dieting for a show, so we couldn't really do anything. We had our meals pre-made, and we're holed up in this kind of suite at this resort. It's rainy, it's windy, and we had one Dell computer that had, I think it was like the original software of what was like, what is that, where you can design graphics and stuff on it. It was terrible. But we did our own design, our own logo, our own font, our own menus over a 4-day stretch, and we could only afford to print so many paper menus. We couldn't even afford trifolds. We did paper menus with our guy that we were using back in Illinois, and he shipped them here. And funny story, we had we called it a wasabi crab wrap. It was like imitation crab with teriyaki. I misspelled crab and put crap, and we couldn't afford to reprint them. We
Oh
were so
no.
broke, we used all the money we had budgeted for that on that original print, and we just used it. We were like, hell with it. Let's just see how it rolls. And lo and behold, man, by the grace of God and the universe, the day one we opened that cafe, there was a line wrapped around the building to get in there and eat. And it kind of stayed that way for a long, long time. And we were like mesmerized because back in Illinois, it was like meat and potatoes land. We had to beg people to come in and eat our kind of healthy-ish, better for you food. We had to convince them to do that. We got here to North Carolina and they tore it up. And so we had that cafe open and running for 2 years, maybe. And there was this group of guys that would come in, and they were from the college. They were from like a school of business here, and they had like Ivana calls them angel investors. I think they were just guys that were working with the business school, and they
Hmm.
kept coming in, and they would sit on the patio. They got to know us by name. They were regular customers, and they were always picking our brain and like, where do you see yourself with this in 5 years? And I'm like, man, I don't know. As long as I'm competing in the next show and I've got my meals for next, I don't really care. We were just kind of young, dumb meatheads at that point. And so we had gotten to a point where they had talked us into, these guys had put it in our head, you might want to expand this, like open this up, open another location and grow this thing. And so we said, okay, let's explore that. And so we went to a local equipment vendor here in town that we had gotten to know by buying some equipment from him. And we were actually trying to design like our perfect space. Like if we were going to design a Clean Eatz, how would we want to do this? And we got about 30 minutes into this conversation, and the guy stops us and he goes, man, I really think you're making a mistake. And we just kind of were like, what? And he was like, I think you should franchise this brand. Like this is a perfect franchise, kind of your branding and what you do and how you're doing it. You need to look at franchising. And he gave us a business card to some guys here in town that's what they did. They took small emerging brands and set them up as a franchise. And so we didn't even know what that was. I mean, to be honest with you, we could barely spell franchising, much less understand. We had no P&L experience. We weren't even tracking a P&L. We didn't care. The way that we were judging our growth and measuring our growth was just cash flow in our bank account.
Yeah.
Like our cash flow was growing, we were growing. Um, Lo and behold, that wasn't true. Our P&L kind of sucked. But we made the decision to franchise with those guys, and we got everything finalized, I think, in August of 2015. Signed our first deal in September. That first franchise opened in January of 2016. And now, as of today, as we speak, we're at 116 locations in 10
It's
years.
such such a crazy story. I
Yeah.
I had no idea the origin story, and For those listening, Don and I's companies, the one I did before, Franzi, what I'm working on now, we worked with a lot of the same kind of vendors. We're both in the same state, and I'd heard a little bit about you guys and what you were doing, but I never knew the extent of, I mean, just the raw grit and how much you guys had to sacrifice and living in the restaurant. I mean, I had no clue. I mean,
Oh yeah.
you and your wife should be incredibly proud. I mean, you hear the stories of like, oh, the startup out of the garage or wherever, and I mean, you guys lived it and did it, and I mean, look at what you guys have built. It's pretty awesome.
I mean, we were so naive when we came here to Wilmington that when we bought the deli, he gave us the contact number and address for the landlord. We didn't even contact the landlord, man. We had no knowledge of, hey, we needed to negotiate a new LOI, a new lease. We drove to the landlord's office, introduced ourselves, and he goes, well, what kind of lease do you want? And I was kind of taken back by that. I said, man, you're the landlord. I don't know. And he said, I'll tell you what, you're good kids. I like you. You can have it for $2,000 a month. And I'm like, done. And he was a Sicilian Italian guy, like the family that owns it, and they're great. They are amazing people. They're still like family to us to this day. But at that time we didn't know them from Adam. And Nick, the landlord, really big Italian guy, huge. He's a big guy. Walks us out to his car. He pops the trunk and he goes, "You see that right there?" And I'm like, "It's a pretty cool car, nice trunk." He goes, "I can fit 6 bodies in that trunk." He goes, "The rent's due on the 15th." Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so been that way ever since.
And did you guys, I mean, opening the store in Wilmington, did you change anything from, the prior stores, or was it always a combo of, meal prep, retail? There's kind of a recurring revenue component too. Was that always there? Did you guys iterate and, build that in on the Wilmington store?
Most of it we moved and then just kind of tweaked it a little bit. Obviously, we brought the meal plan component of it with us, which I can tell you a funny story on that in a second. But having the cafe, meal plans, and grab and goes,
Hmm.
those were the big three. Now we have five. Marketplace is a revenue stream that we talk about now, and that just kind of grew over time. That started like little snack items that her and I would do. We'd literally put them in Ziploc bags and throw them in a cooler and sell them for like $1, $2. You're talking like granola and like little energy
Yeah.
bars. Now it's a full blown revenue stream. Everything is CPG. It's prepackaged with co-mans. It's branded. I could throw it in grocery stores. I mean, it's come a long, long way in 10 years. But the meal plan process has also came a long way. And when we used to do our meal plans back in Illinois, we couldn't afford a website. So we used to text out to our customers on a little flip phone. It would take me about an hour and a half, text like 90 customers a menu, and they would text their order back. That grew into us being able to afford to do an email. Back then, remember, used to have to pay for email storage. So
Hmm.
we generated an email, then we were emailing it out, and I was like tracking emails that were coming in every week. And then eventually we had made enough money that we could build a website. And we set up an order plat. This was before e-com was even a thing. But we built in a thing to where it would count meals as they come in, and we would be able to track it that way. And then by the time we moved to Wilmington, we were able to build a legitimate kind of nice website, and then that's kind of evolved. But that whole structure has changed 180 degrees from when we started it.
How did the first one, so at one point you were looking at opening more corporate stores, but then you met this individual who's like, this is perfect for franchising for all these reasons. You got the brand, you could centralize a kitchen and, distribute things that way. When the first two franchise locations opened, I mean, what were the biggest lessons you guys learned? Did everything go, well and it was all,
No.
fine and
Oh
dandy,
no.
or what broke?
Everything. The hardest part for her and I, which I'm assuming every, startup franchise does this, especially if you're a founder, you have to take what's in your head and what you've just done off muscle memory, and you have to figure out how to put that on paper. That's step one. And then you have to figure out how to systemize it to where it's duplicatable enough that it's very easy to train somebody to do that. And we did that, but I don't think it was efficient enough for us at the time that we were able to launch it without anything breaking. And almost by the grace of God, our first 6 franchisees were very loyal, regular customers of ours that were living in Wilmington that moved to other destinations to open these things. And we leaned on them tremendously in that first year to help us build out SOPs and trainings and things like that. They were very, very heavily involved in that in the beginning.
Where did the first few open? Where did they move to? Was it still within the state, or were some of these like hours away? And
So we purposely kept it centralized in North and South Carolina
okay,
for the first few, and then we slowly ventured into Georgia, Florida, and then we kept it there for a long time. But the first one was in Myrtle Beach. Then the second one I think was Columbia, South Carolina area. Then it was Charleston, Raleigh, Fayetteville. You know, your major, then Charlotte. Your major hubs in North and South Carolina is where we grew first. Thank
and
God.
did you guys think to add more corporate stores, or have you since, or has it been like, hey, the franchise system's working, let's just focus our time and energy on menu and distribution and customer acquisition and things like that?
Yeah, we didn't take on a dime in debt. So Yvonne and I were bootstrapping this whole thing for a long, long time. And so the thought of opening more corporate stores, we're like, no way. We don't have the bandwidth. We're figuring the franchising out as we go.
Hmm.
So like we jumped off the cliff and we're packing our parachute on the way down, I think. And we just said, look, let's just focus on franchising. And then down the road, if doing more corporate stores, makes sense, we'll do it then. Now we run 4 corporate locations. We have the one here in Wilmington, we have Jacksonville, and then I bought an owner out in the Savannah, Pullard, Georgia area, which, I mean, eventually that will get refranchised. We're just hanging on to it and running it corporately for now.
Yep. I mean, food is tough in general, right? And I know you guys are doing a little bit different model with the meal prep and the other revenue streams, but for someone listening that might be looking at food franchises, what do you think people underestimate the most when it comes to that type of business?
Um, Probably unit economics, which sounds like a cliche answer. Um, I always laugh and tell everybody when I got into this, I was a meathead carpenter, man. I was an ops driven guy just by being a carpenter, right? Like very list driven. I didn't know much about finance, real estate. I was leaning on outsourced vendors for all of that. But over the course of 10 years, I mean, I'd laugh and joke and say I have a bro degree in real estate, contract law. In like, I've just learned by screwing it up so many times over the last 10 years that now I know what to do, what not to do. But I think if I was going to go into it and look at another food brand, I would look at the founders first. Like it has to resonate. That has to mean something. Like I'm not going to go buy hot Dave's Hot Chicken, even though it's a very hot concept. It makes a ton of money. I just, for me, selling chicken sandwiches just doesn't resonate with me. So it's got to mean something. That's step one. And then the second thing is can I make money at it? And there's a lot of ways now where you can kind of tweak your FDD to look better than what it really is. There's concepts out there that do that, unfortunately. But really understanding that item 19 before you buy one is key.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's good feedback. Like you said, it's got to resonate with you. You got to care about it enough to show up every day and make the sacrifices that, that you guys have made. And it's got to make money at the end of the day. So I agree, you got to pay attention to the unit economics. I mean, you've now seen 100 plus locations open. If someone were to open a Clean Eatz tomorrow, of all the data that you've seen, all the stores that have opened, what would you tell that operator to focus on in the first 90 days that sets them up for the highest chance at winning and highest chance at success?
Do not, under any circumstances, look at your numbers in the first 90 days. Those first 90 days they should be all about customer service and building relationships. Don't even look at your P&L. Don't even focus on analytics, data, P&Ls, labor, the whole gamut. Just set it off to the side and know that it's there. But those first 90 days are crucial in building relationships. And if you don't do it, you're dead before you get going.
Do you think that's why the first one did, you said that when the first one opened, you had like a line around the block. Was it because you had already gone into the Gold's Gym and the supplement company and
Absolutely.
started building some of that early pent-up
Yep.
demand?
Yep. We talk about that to this day, 10 years later, that we got a gym membership there at Gold's. Then we went and got one at CrossFit. Then we went, even though we hated CrossFit, we didn't do it, but we bought a membership and we trained there. Um, Anything else that we could afford to do. And we went to the gym wearing our t-shirts, holding menus in our bags. We had little coupon cards made and we were rifling these out and just promoting the opening of the cafe for as long as we could before we opened it. And that's the same exact playbook that we have right now with every new store. Is we call it a launch marketing plan now, but essentially it's a scaled version of what we did 10 years ago. We do a trade area analysis with incoming candidates. There's a girl here in our office that's her full-time job, is local store marketing manager. And she'll work with every incoming candidate on doing a trade and area analysis on, this is where you need to go market. This is how many events you need to do before the whole playbook. And I think the big thing with us is, emails are king right now. So that's how we sell our meal plans, is we sign them up, we get their email so that we can blast menus out to them and text messages. And so we have them collect as much of that as possible, knowing what our conversion rate is. And so we always tell them, look, this is our average, conversion rate. So figure you need X amount to convert to this much in the first 90 days. So you need to hit the ground running. Don't slack, start marketing right now.
Yeah, I've noticed with a lot of, especially food-based concepts, that first month really dictates almost everything else. Like you've got to come out with a bang and get wait lists and grand opening splashes and partnerships and activations
Oh yeah.
because there's
One of
just
the
so
biggest
much.
things I see food brands where they go wrong, especially startups, um, is not doing that. They're afraid that, well, I don't want to market too much because I don't want somebody to have a bad experience when they come in. But what's not clicking is if you don't do any of it, nobody's going to know you're there. So this whole mindset of, I'm going to have a flood come in my door when I just go click that open. That's not going to happen.
Mm-mm.
Not now, not in these days anyway.
No, you got to be everywhere. Once the business is up and running, is there like two or three metrics that or levers that you tell operators and that you guys focus on yourselves every day that move the business forward? Is it, some businesses have like, cost of making a meal per labor hour or, a meal sold per labor hour. Are there certain metrics that you guys really dial in on and tell every owner and operator to think through like, hey, if you focus on these two things, you'll do well?
Um, I mean, it's your standard ones for every restaurant, really. Like I said, those first 90 days, we tell them not to even worry about it.
Yeah.
Market, 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 building relationships, get out, talk to people, spend all of your time in the dining room, shaking hands, kissing babies. But after that, that's when they need to start paying attention to their labor budget, their food costs, everything a typical restaurant would track as a KPI.
And do you guys have systems built out for them to track those things, or is it, they're pulling
Yep.
spreadsheets and you have to get good at figuring this out?
Yeah, we use Restaurant 365.
Yeah, yeah.
Not going over well with our owners. We don't like it. It's a very cumbersome platform, but right now it's kind of the best you're going to get, for the price that it is. But we have other like internal dashboards that they have dashboards. They can track it. They can kind of do it themselves now. But
I'll make a note. I'll follow up with you after this, but I got something that we're building. I'd love to run by you at some
sure.
point, but it kind of solves some of this. Um, for the high performing locations that are in the system, what sets those locations apart from the other ones that are, average or below average? Is it location? Is it the operator? Is it, relationships they have with affiliate businesses? What are the things that make them exceptional versus the others?
Um, there is a huge gap from what I'll call our top 20% to our middle quartile, is what we call it. And those are the people that track their data like the back of their hand. Eventually at some point, the restaurant game is a penny business. That old saying, track your pennies, the dollars will follow in the food game. That is absolutely
Yeah.
true. And those guys do it almost kind of obsessively, if you will. There's a few that do it to a fault where they spend so much time tracking their data and their analytics that they forget, hey man, I'm in the people business too. I need to go talk to people. I need to go, continue to build these relationships, which is a constant reminder from us. Hey, you're doing great, but you need to keep doing this or this is going to start to fall. But it's just that they pay attention to their numbers. They're smart with their labor budgets. They're very, very anal on their food costs. They watch who's ordering their food, when they're doing it, the timing and everything. And then the ones that don't do that, you can see a huge difference in the way their business operates. The other thing that I think the top quartile does is they did all of that pre-marketing very well before they opened. So they came out of the gate hot.
So the two takeaways are know your numbers. They tell a story, they're a compass, they tell you where to focus and where you can improve things. And then two, you got to make a bang out of the gate and be everywhere, be top of mind. That momentum kind of, takes care of itself from there. When you were saying earlier, like the 3 or 4 numbers that you look at, food costs, labor costs, et cetera, is there a rule of thumb that you have that, like, if you're looking at a dashboard of, all 100 stores, if you look at these numbers, food costs should be less than 20%, labor should be, are there metrics like that? And are you comfortable sharing some of those for those listening as they start to do diligence on restaurant concepts? What is like an average?
Our model is way different. So, I mean, I could tell you what industry averages are, and then I can tell you what ours are.
Yeah.
Ours are going to run a little higher naturally on an average basis because of who we are and what we do. Right. And I always tell candidates at discovery days when they're coming in and we're vetting them, they're vetting us, that sort of thing. The way that I explain the brand is we are 5 micro businesses under one roof, and they have to be treated as such. Like, you have to understand that the margins that you're getting on our what we call marketplace, that's a retail margin. You're not going to get the same margin as you would by buying a case of chicken from US Foods, right? It's just 2 different things, and it's 2 different business models. So that's the hard part that they struggle with, call it the first year, until they get their sea legs under them. Figuring out how to optimize those 5 revenue streams takes a little bit of time because it is very, very difficult. Right, we're not a burger chain or a sub chain to where we only do one thing. We do 5, and it's difficult. But yeah, I mean, average food cost for a unit, we lump it in. We just say COGS is 38 or less, food and paper. If they're doing that, they're doing well. And then labor, depending on the location and like their kind of where they're located, right, because of labor rates and everything else. Anything under 23 to 25%, they're probably doing pretty well. So we use a prime cost of less than 60%.
Okay. And then how does that, when you say compared to you guys are a non-traditional food concept, what is it for do you know the industry average for like QSR or your quick service restaurants or other food concepts?
I know a few of them off the top of my head. I know most places, if your food breaks 30%, they're freaking out, right? Ours is going to because of what we sell. So,
yeah.
I don't know average paper. Labor, I think in QSR, I know it's under 20%, but I don't know what the industry average is off the top of my head.
And when you say paper, is that like packaging and what you're putting the food in? Okay.
Yeah, bags, cups, lids, straws, that sort of thing.
That's super helpful. So the other thing I think people wonder about too is, we get asked this question all the time. It's like, do I have to quit my job to do this? How long does it take before it becomes cash flow positive? What are your answers to that for your guys' business specifically?
For Clean Eatz, I always advise them, do not quit your job right away. I mean, unless you have the financial capability to do it, but most people don't. And so, a lot of times we'll get a dual partnership. It's either a husband and wife or, friends who are partnering on this, and, somebody in their family still has an income coming in. And the very first thing I say is, don't ever quit that. At the end of the day, I can show you all the bells and whistles of this brand, and we have 5 revenue streams that, the ones that do this successfully can make a lot of money in this and can get an ROI on it pretty quickly. But if you have 1 or 2 bad months, man, you're done, right? As high as the SBA rates are right now, which I think they're getting better, but not fast enough for everybody to be comfortable. But just call it last year when they were, what was it, 9.5 plus prime. That was killing a lot of our owners who were on those adjustable rates. I mean, they went from having a mortgage payment of, call it 4 grand, 4.5 to 5,000, to it almost doubling. It's very hard to make money at doing that. I mean, some of them were barely getting by without having to just throw in the towel. And there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. I couldn't do
Yeah.
anything to help them. So that's where I always tell them, hey man, if you've got an income that you can keep going, I would do that as long as you can until you can either one, build up the single unit that you have to where it can support your family and the household income, or until you can grow a portfolio if they did call it a multi-unit deal, until you can build out 2 or 3 of these to where you're making really good money across the 3 of them before you give up whatever career it was that you had.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree
Don't
with
always
that.
listen to me, but
No. Well, I think you have to your point, like any retail-based business, you really have to control the fixed costs up front too. If your build out's more than you anticipated, or interest rates, like you said, 2, 3x, or equipment costs go up. I mean, those are things that you can't really reverse, and you can't pick up and move the location. Once you're in it, and those costs are there. You've got to be right about the location and how you build it.
and that's one thing I don't want to say we got it wrong, but I don't think that we did a good, and it was just being young, right? But in the beginning, we weren't doing a really good job at doing due diligence. We were running numbers, right? Like we wouldn't let a franchisee sign a lease that was, astronomically high. And that system and that process, we refined it a lot just in the last 5 years to where now we have the tools to run a full pro forma on that location, especially with AI and the way they're getting data now. Like you can almost kind of get really close and predict the revenue that would come out of that particular address and that location just based off consumer data that these analytic companies have now. So we've gotten a lot better using the tools that are at our disposal now versus 5 years ago when they didn't exist.
Yeah. And how long again do you think, like I'm a new owner, I open my store next week. How long do you think it takes before the business starts to kind of stabilize and it might be growing a little bit year over year, but where it really starts to become, hey, this is kind of where it's going to level off? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? 6 months?
Um, Again, we're different than most QSR fast casual brands. So that is very subjective for us on the owner, on how much pre-marketing they do, on how well they pick up the systems for the 5 revenue streams that we have. I've seen them kind of, I don't want to say plateau, but I've seen them hit their peak in the first year, and I've seen it take anywhere from 1 to 3 years.
Okay.
And I've seen them get a cash on cash return. I've seen some of it happen in a year, and again, some of them it takes 3 years. It just
Hmm.
really depends on the owner and how they drive that business.
Okay. Very helpful. Well, just to before we wrap up, I've always got a section I like to do some kind of quick hitter type
Yeah.
questions. They're maybe 1 or 2 sentence kind of answers, but let's wrap up with those, and we'll go from there. The first one is, all right, the healthy food trend or franchise. Do you think it's do you think it is a trend or that it's here to stay? So things like the acai bowls, and I mean, you guys have been doing this for over a decade. Do you feel like, hey, this is rooted in our culture and people are only wanting to get healthier and healthier, or does it feel like it's a trend?
I think aspects of it are a trend. I think healthy eating is going to continue to grow. I think people are making more conscious decisions as time goes on, but I do think that certain aspects of it are very trendy and they have a very short lifespan. Acai bowls being one of them. Like full brands, depending on that. I think
Hmm.
that's gonna ebb and flow. One of the things, just being transparent with you, that we've noticed is the prepackaged meal business has exploded since Yvonne and I kind of got into this. When we started doing this in 2010 together, you couldn't find anybody else doing it. We couldn't. I mean, even nationwide, there was very, very few people doing this. Now you can get on the internet and throw a tennis ball and hit 9 of them in 10 seconds. I mean, they're
Yeah.
everywhere. And so we're kind of trying to figure out, okay, we've been doing this for a year. The term that I keep using in our office is I'm trying not to become MySpace,
Hmm.
right? Like I don't want to be the first player to the game, but all these newcomers are going to pass us up. And that's kind of what we're dealing with now. We've seen a decline in our sales and our numbers and our comp data on the meal plan revenue itself because there is so much competition out there. And so I think that's going to be the answer to your question is if people don't figure out how to reinvent themselves over time, you're going to see it.
Yeah, I agree because when you look at all the trends on like even less and less people are drinking alcohol. Like the younger
Mhm.
generations are doing all the non-alcoholic drinks or the like athletic brewing where it's you know again alcohol-free beers, etc. But then there was the wave in the mid like 2015s or so of like plated and Blue Apron that were like somewhat not fully prepackaged, but then some of them died because the unit economics didn't make sense. But I feel like recently there's been a more and more popping up, like a Factor and some of these other online ones, and it is interesting to see things kind of come and go. And what I really like about your guys' model is it's local. There's someone that is in the community there. They're plugged into the health and wellness community. Um, and there's something about that that can't be, I feel like, replicated. You got to be in it, like you said, and you got to be a part of that community. So I think it will be interesting to see, and I think you guys are in a really good position to not be a MySpace.
Yep. Trying.
Is there one decision that changed Clean Eats forever? I think I know the answer, but what is it for you?
Yes. Big one. I got to be careful how I talk about this for legal reasons, but I always joke and I say I made two kind of dumb decisions in my life. One, I got married really young. So marrying my first wife. Nothing personal against her. We were just young and dumb and naive kids. The second one, I signed a contract in 2016 that almost cost us the entire company.
Mm.
It was with a consultant that turned out to be a complete fraud. I'll just call it that. And it almost cost us the entire company. And it was because I was too, I don't know, arrogant or naive or dumb, all of the above probably. And I thought I could kind of negotiate this contract by myself without an attorney, without having to pay an arm and a leg because we were broke. I mean, we couldn't afford an attorney, and so by doing that, that turned into a really big legal battle a year later that almost cost us the company. And
Yeah,
so
I mean,
the lesson
you're
there
here.
is now I don't ever sign a contract before my attorney reads it first.
Yeah, they're not cheap, but they're worth it in the long run, especially when things go wrong. My guess was that your answer was going to be moving to Wilmington.
Well, that yeah, I mean that's kind of a given, but yeah, Clean Eatz wouldn't be here if we didn't move. That's for sure.
All right, I got one or two more for you. The next one is kind of a fill in the blank, and it's the best franchisees all have blank in common.
Oh man, they follow the system. They follow the model. I mean, every franchisor that if they listen to this, they're going to go like this, and they're going to be a bobblehead. But it amazes me still to this day, and I've been in franchising for going on 10 years now. The amount of people that come into a franchise, and I talk about this a lot. I drive it home so almost to a fault at a discovery day that we have a playbook. It works. Use it for a year. We're always open to feedback and constructive criticism. We very much so practice extreme ownership around here. So if
Mhm.
we screw up, we make a mistake, we'll own it, we'll fix it. But our model works. Follow it. Otherwise, why'd you buy a franchise? You know, because every franchise candidate that comes in, they're like, yeah, we want to come into this because you guys have it figured out. How many times have you heard that line in franchising? You guys have figured it out. You have the playbook. But then lo and behold, 80% of the people that say that will come in, they'll sign a franchise agreement, and then immediately pivot hard left or hard right and change the model or change how we're doing it. Happens all
Mhm.
the time. That's just, I've gotten so used to it. I just say that's the nature of franchising, unfortunately.
You're so right because I think people that want to own a franchise, they're somewhat entrepreneurial in nature, right? Like they want to go on their own thing. They want to do their because they still are business owners at the end of the day. They're still entrepreneurs at the end of the day. It's just they're buying into and you're paying essentially for a system, but then that entrepreneurial part of them like overtakes. I was like, I'm gonna go try to sell this or do this thing differently or make it better. Which to you said, like you said, there's a point at which that can make sense, but a lot of the times you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to be a really good operator and be good with talking to customers and selling and managing a team and again operating the business. And then it's funny, like we had this experience. People would come in, they wouldn't follow the playbook or the systems. They deviate. You'd allow them to deviate and be open to being
Yeah.
entrepreneurial. And then it doesn't work out. And then they're mad at you. Like, well, why did this not work? I'm like, we told you not to do it.
Yep.
You tried it. It didn't work. So don't blame us.
That is the
Um,
story of my life, man. I deal with it on a daily basis. And I always tell people too, like, you bought this franchise to follow this model. If you didn't want to do that, and you mentioned they're entrepreneur, they have an entrepreneurial mindset, but at the end of the day, I try to kind of embolden everybody in our brand. Like, our franchisees aren't entrepreneurs at the end of the day, they're entrepreneurs. And the bad thing that I think is going on in franchising right now is, especially with broker networks, and you go to IFA and everything else, and they talk about the same thing, and they talk about the franchisee being the customer of the franchisor. That could not be further from the truth. The franchisee is not a customer, they are a partner. And until they start changing that language, none of this is going to change, because the
yeah.
franchisee has it in their head that the franchisor should bend the knee to them and give them anything that they want, and that they're always right because they're the customer. You are not the customer. We are partners in our customer base.
Mm-hmm.
That's the language that has to change for any of these issues to go away. And good luck.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think in part of the broker kind of dynamic, I think is changing. There's more regulation coming, and I think some of that will be good. But to your point, it's all expectation setting. And I think to the extent the brand can explain the culture and hey, what our beliefs are and how we operate, that's the only way around it. Otherwise, I agree with you. I think too much of the narrative is, hey,
One of the
you're a
best
customer of mine.
one of the best explanations I ever heard was along these lines. And he mentioned the word sale. And he asked, and I had him speak at our convention, and he said, all of you here have read an FDD, you've read a franchise agreement. I've read thousands of them. And I even admitted I've read and drafted hundreds of them by now. And all of my years and all of your experience, have you ever heard or seen the word sale in a franchise agreement? You don't. It doesn't exist. It never has. In 100 years of franchising, that word sale has never been in a franchise agreement. So these broker networks talk about sales. I'm selling franchises. I'm doing this. I'm selling. You're not selling anything. You're not. You're recruiting partners.
Yeah.
Still, that's like the language and the perception right now is so screwed up with this
Yeah.
industry. And until that mentality, that perception gets fixed, none of these problems are going away anytime soon.
Yeah. I think it's more matchmaking and, like you said, recruiting than anything. The
He
last
used the he
question I have.
used the
Oh, go ahead.
driver's license as a good he used the driver's license as a good analogy. He's holding up this driver's license, and he was like, "Can the state take this away?" Yes. Did I buy it? No. Why is the rules and regulations enforced? To protect other drivers.
Yeah.
Then he holds up the FDD. He's like, "Did you buy this?" No, you didn't buy it. You paid a fee to be able to use it. But if you don't follow the rules and regs, the franchisor can take it away from you, just like the state can take this away. It was just a cool
Yeah.
analogy. So,
That is a cool. I've never heard that. I like that. All right, the last one I have for you is now that you're 10 years in, this has evolved into something probably beyond your guys' initial, wildest dreams. What does success look like for you guys now? As you think about it for you as a family, you as an individual, how has that changed and what does it look like today?
hmm, man, that's a tough one to answer. Um, we almost sold the company to a private equity firm in 2023. And we got very close, and we wound up just kind of mutually parting ways. Various reasons. It wasn't that, we didn't like them or anything. They were great to work with. We just didn't feel like it was the right time for Yvonne and I to step away as founders, because, people say we're big. We've got 116 units. Well, at the end of the day, that's still a very small franchise if you think about it. And I have days where I regret this, sometimes sarcastically speaking. I'm joking, but all of our owners have our contact info, and we're really close to all of them. They really truly are like a family. And that's very cliche in this industry. Everybody says, "Oh, we're family," but in a sense, we kind of are because we talk to them all the time and we have a very good relationship with 80% of them, sometimes 90%, just depending on the day in the week. And just, we've never really found the right time where we're like, okay, we always said if we got to a point where we were doing the brand more harm than good by staying in the driver's seat, then at that time we would pass it on, as long as we knew that we were picking the right partner, that, private equity wasn't going to come in and just start driving numbers down everybody's throat and the culture dies overnight. So I don't know if that answered your question, gave you an exact answer, but those are kind of the things that we look at as an ongoing basis of timing, and when should Yvonne and I kind of step aside and bring in an equity partner and let them take this to the next level, is those sort of things.
Yeah, so success maybe to you guys is when the business is at a point that, if you guys disappeared for 6 months, it would continue. Everyone would be taken care of. They'd be in good hands, and you guys have to continue to build in your systems, the team, et cetera, to be able to get there.
Correct.
I love it. Well, Don, I appreciate you taking the time again to share your wisdom, share the story. I mean, again, I had no idea the amount of sacrifice. I know every business has sacrifice going into it, but just the sheer, grit and will again that you guys had to make it happen. Again, kudos to you guys. You should be really proud of what you've done. It's not easy. If there's anywhere that people can find you, whether that's Instagram or a website, is there anywhere you want to send people that are listening?
Yeah, it's just Don Varady on most platforms: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Those are the three that I use the most. I did start kind of an investment type of company. It's called Integrity Brands, and I'm working with 2 different brands right now where I have ownership in it. And it's more of a kind of a board role, if you will. I don't run anything day to day. I don't spend a lot of time running it too much, but you can find me there at integritybrands.com. That's kind of gives more into kind of what I do on that side. But
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Don. I appreciate it, and looking forward to keeping in touch.
awesome, man. Thank you. This was fun.